Greetings, mortals of the internet. Prepare yourselves for a rendezvous with the Lord of Darkness, the unforgivable blasphemer, the maestro of reason who casts a shadow upon ignorance and superstition. Yes, you've guessed it. We've summoned the one and only Aaron Ra.
Aaron.
Sorry, it's my accent. Once again, this is your host, George with a G, aka the Legend of Honolulu himself. And we are here with my awesome co-host. Going to go ahead and pass it off to him, and let's get this party started.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We have the esteemed Aaron Ra. I am James, your co-host, and we're here to possibly discuss and explore the world of UAPs and the phenomenon that seems to be happening right now. And we're going to get his take, and I'm excited to dive right in.
Okay. I was a little curious as to why you asked me to comment on a topic that I've never done a single video about. I haven't been following it too much of this. So maybe if you ask me specific questions, I mean, I know that you expressed that you wanted me to give an overall opinion, I guess, going back from like the tradition of U.F.O.ology, I suppose. Yeah.
You know, so, I've got a few specific questions for sure that I'd love to get your take on. I mean, I could start right away with some of the juicy stuff. You know, I'm an aviation enthusiast and I'm an art director and CGI artist by trade. I was the youngest member of the Rocky Mountain Skeptics as a child, and they're like, there's hope for the future. So I come to this topic with a very skeptical, hopefully rational take on it. And really that was it. But then I had an experience of my own, which I thought, you know, okay, I could easily write this off, but it was corroborated by my downstairs neighbor, which then
not also corroborated by your proctologist, right?
No, he didn't find it in my ass, thank God. Because if he did, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be talking to a doctor. So that was really what, you know, I mean, if you want to hear the specifics, it was just, you know, I just had a dream. I'm thinking it's a dream. I'm in bed. I was, you know, paralyzed, and, you know, there's lots of scientific reasons for sleep paralysis, and we can get into that. But in the dream, I was visited by these standard gray aliens, and I sat up and I tried to grab one of them, and they fell to the floor. They tumbled down like marionettes. And I thought, whatever, weird dream, who cares? And I brought it up to my downstairs neighbor, we were in Chicago at the time in kind of a larger building, and his room was one floor below mine in the exact same position, very large spaces that we had. And he had the exact same dream. He was like, oh my God, he turned pale, and he was like, dude, that's the exact same dream. I tried to grab one of them, and then they fell to the ground. But there were differences. The way he described them looked differently. The way his paralysis, the way he tried to get up was different. So there was discrepancies, but they were relatively the same thing, like a shared dream experience. Now, I've never in my life had anything like that happen. And I started thinking, okay, what other, you know, so then I started thinking about this for the first time in my life, and I started diving deep into like, abduction stories and trying to find commonalities. Did anyone else have any kind of experience like I did? And were there commonalities? So I started researching all of the different abduction stories, looking for commonalities, and then kind of tying them together and seeing, okay, these all line up. And that's basically what happened to me. And I'm curious, you know, from a rational standpoint, what do you think happened there?
Well, I'm not sure what prompted the standard gray aliens, but I would have to say that it's going to be media based. I know where you can get a baggie of particles that if you consume them, you will get the electric chartreuse or sometimes safety orange aliens. And I know where you can get a book of stamps that if you lick one of the stamps, then you can get the Paisley aliens that turn two-dimensional and then explode all over your face.
But do you sleep when that's happening? I mean, this was a sleep experience. I don't think you can sleep with all that going on.
I've had sleep paralysis dreams too. The interesting thing for me is when I have a sleep paralysis dream is that this is where the supernatural happens. And I remember being in one dream, I was being possessed by a demon who was making fun of me for not believing in it when it was possessing me because of my hypocrisy.
Huh.
And I realized that, yeah, I must be a huge fucking hypocrite if I don't believe in demons. And here I am being possessed by one. But then I didn't realize at the moment I was asleep.
Right.
And what
Right.
should have been the clue is that I was capable of flying and of doing combat with these demons by shooting photon torpedoes out of the palms of my hands. Those would be things that normally would tell you that, hey, you're asleep.
But did you share this dream with anyone? Did someone else in your home have the exact same dream on the same night?
No, I haven't heard that coincidence. Out of 8 billion people on the planet, all with shared media, I'm going to say that it's probable that that's going to happen at some point.
So it was just a statistical anomaly, just totally by chance?
It's not something we hear about often, is it?
No.
But I've had shared supernatural experiences with my associates in the paranormal, because I was an initiate into neo-pagan spirituality. I was working with a druid at one point. I was into transcendental meditation. I was dealing with different people, and we were having shared experiences. And this is back in like high school. But when I fast forward to the internet age, and I realize that, hey, when I begin to question my position, and I realize that I've had that the only reason I'm clinging on to this is because I've had these personal experiences where I've seen these things, and there were other people involved.
I get it.
You know, the astral projection thing, the combat with translucent or transparent gargoyles that are capable of making things move around the room, that sort of thing. And I can remember that other people are involved and shared these experiences. But when I realized that there is no evidence for the supernatural at all whatsoever, apart from anecdotal nonsense, I thought, well, at least I have this shared experience. So when I go find these people, the people who participated in the transcendental meditation, who participated in the paranormal encounters, I will find these people through the power of the internet, which you can go find the people that you went to high school with, even if you haven't spoken to each other in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And a couple of surprises there.
They don't remember it.
They don't remember it the same way that I did. They don't remember it at all. What I remember so vividly is sharing with those people. Both of them are like, the fuck are you talking about?
Oh no.
Yeah, that didn't happen. And
Yeah.
both of them, while they were both extremely spiritual at the time, I mean, one of them is cautioning me about the dangers of transcendental meditation and all of this. And she doesn't even remember doing transcendental meditation anymore.
Weird.
She's a hardcore skeptic now.
Mm-hmm.
And the druid that I was working with, who was into all kinds of spiritual warfare, again, hardcore rationalist. There's no supernatural. All of that is bullshit. How did these people, the two most spiritual people I've ever met in my life, how did they become complete rationalists, giving up every essence of the supernatural and not having any memory at all of the only evidence that I had for the shared experience?
Strange. That's very strange. The guy downstairs that I had this experience with, this was relatively recent, like 10 years ago. And I did contact him before talking about it because I wanted to, bring him on or mention his name. He's like, look, he's also a very rational, skeptical guy, not a spiritual person at all. And he's like, honestly, I don't like thinking about it. He's like, if I hadn't shared that experience with you, I probably would never think about it again or talk about it. So let's just leave it at that. And I'm like, oh, come on, man, this is interesting. And we gotta dig a little bit deeper. And he just wouldn't hear it. And that was my gateway into this whole thing, was like, okay, there's gotta be something going on here. Now you mentioned the media I guess projection of the standard gray. Like, what do you mean by that? Like it shared experiences being, I guess, we're impressionable by these media.
You had the American hallucination because you're American. You didn't have the European hallucination of the European aliens because you're not European. They see a different collection of aliens than Americans do. Asians have another set of aliens that are different than the Europeans, that are different than the Americans.
Yeah.
I
And
don't
my
know if
downstairs
there
neighbor
is.
saw something different too. It wasn't
Yeah, I
exactly
don't
the
know
same.
if there's a sub-equatorial collection of different aliens. I'm only aware
Probably.
of but they're, on this side of the equator, Asia, Europe, and North America, they all have their own distinct version of aliens that people commonly see. And the people in North America tend not to see the Asian version. They don't tend to see the European version. Now, why the fuck is that?
Interesting.
Because it's a media-based phantasm.
Yeah, my downstairs neighbor saw
that's
them
one
as tall
explanation
and brown.
Now, I
He saw them as
understand.
tall and brown, not gray and short like I did.
Yeah. So that how much time has he spent in Europe?
Carson, my friend, he's from Chicago. There are a lot of brown people in Chicago.
No. I don't mean brown people. I mean the tall alien versus the short alien. I can't remember. It's been too long since I was reading about these distinctions. You're going to go up there. I have a tree just off camera that I put up here.
It's a beautiful
actual
snake.
Tree. Thank you. I put up this tree here for my parrot, but every time I get a snake out, the snakes want to get on the tree.
Can't blame him.
That's what he's going to do. No, he's not, because you're a ground python, aren't you? You can't climb for shit. Okay.
Now, Mr. Raw, I have to ask you about your T-shirt. I'm sorry for interrupting, but can you share with the audience your T-shirt? And before you go into that, in all the years I followed you, you've talked about atheism, being a member of the Satanic Temple, debating with Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons. But I've never seen you talk about extraterrestrial life or aliens or any of its implications. So,
well, while I would absolutely love to believe that we've had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, I would love for that to be true so much. I don't think it is. And this is fully accepting that some of the unidentified aerial phenomena, the UFOs, are not just hallucinations. There's something real out there.
We just don't know what they are.
I accept that some of these things are legit. That there really are things there. They really are unexplained. That doesn't mean that I have an explanation for them.
Right.
But my basic opinion is I have to think that if you look at the biodiversity of this planet alone, look at everything that we've ever tried to come up with for what an alien would look like. We always make it out to be an animal, a mammal, a primate, a human with different forehead, different shaped ears, different colored skin, but a human. And even if they're 3 foot tall and bulbous headed, it's still a human. It looks like a 9-year-old girl wearing a light bulb for a head. Yeah, it's still a human. Because we have limited imagination. Whenever we've tried to create an alien and make it actually look alien, what's the best we could do? We come up
amorphous
with amorphous
blobs. Yeah, right.
Amorphous blobs. Yeah, those are good. And we've done probably the best aliens, the most alien aliens we've ever done have been based on insects or been based on cephalopods. You get into something that's invertebrate, you get into something that's marine, and now you've got some differences. But it's still the limits of our imagination. Everything we've ever tried to create, as far as a fictional creature, based on something real, it violates taxonomy, perhaps, but it's still not very original.
Interesting you mentioned that, because you've talked about the cultural aspect and the influence with respect to these archetypes that are implanted accordingly in various countries, for instance. And there is a preponderance of this bilateral symmetry aspect in which we imagine these alien creatures to be somewhat similar to us, with 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, and etc.
Excuse me. I have a dog who insists
You don't
that
say.
on disturbing every podcast I'm ever involved in.
Man, it's fine. If that's
all good.
that's a price I'm willing to pay to have a conversation with you, my friend, for sure. You know,
Well, thank you, Mom.
you mentioned that you're not super up to date on the whole field. There's a lot of people saying, well, there's some people saying that this is not necessarily extraterrestrial, that this is in fact we're getting creative here, that there's a time travel aspect to it, that these are in fact beings going back in time to harvest DNA for purposes of the future that are toxic and wrecked. So they need to go back and get, more viable DNA to bring to the future, et cetera, and that they take these photos because they're not scary. They're less scary looking.
Project yourself into the future by 10 years. Do you need to harvest DNA anymore?
I mean, if there's been a radiological event, maybe. I mean, if there's been
why would you need to harvest DNA? We're well on the
because
we're well
it's
on the
damaged.
Way. We're well on the way of calculating what DNA does and how to manipulate it to make what we want.
Mm-hmm.
I created a when I was a kid, when I was like 9, I came up with a science fiction story for myself, and I started working on the scientific story or sci-fi story well through adolescence. I was adding to this to the point that I'm, here I am, and even in high school, I'm still writing bits on this story in comic book form because I'm a kid, and so I write in comic books. But it's all based on this story. And the original story was, since I was 9, since like 1971, is that somebody figures out how to calculate what DNA does, how to eliminate junk DNA that isn't regulatory, that isn't how to eliminate the functionless DNA and how to code for everything for exactly what the results are going to be. And to the point that you don't need to harvest DNA. You can just fucking make it.
But what if there was a radiological disaster that prevents that from, I don't know.
Make it. If there's a radiological disaster that ruins DNA that already exists, you already know what the coordinates are for different types of features for all of this. Now, it would be a vast what is the word I'm looking for? It would be a vast archive of information for all of this, because you had different combinations, of course, exponentially become more and more complex. But you can still create whatever the fuck you want. You have your basic template. You know what all of these things do. You know how all of these things, and you know what the changes are that make anything. The changes in genes between this ball python and the standard ball pythons that used to exist 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there were 3 morphs of ball python. 3. There are hundreds now. So we know what gene. Well, my wife would be able to tell you. I don't, because I'm not a big fan of ball pythons. But she'll be able to tell you, what all of the different genes are why she bought this particular monstrosity. It's not just that it was pretty, but because of what it can do, what you can make out of it. If you breed this with this other combination of genes, then you can roll the dice and possibly get a double copy of this other gene combination, which would then give you a multi-$1,000 product.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well,
and I'm not saying I believe these things. I'm just letting you know this is some of the more recent lore, that our species is being used to help procreate a species that is no longer capable of procreating. In my research from abduction stories, because I got interested in this whole thing, I found a common thread, which was basically hybridization of some kind. For whatever it's worth, that seems to be a very big common thread. People,
can I just jump in here right away?
Please,
whenever I've tried to talk to creationists and try to explain what evolution is, hybridization is the only fucking thing they can understand. It's like, okay, well, you want to take this and cross it with that. Well, I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about taking 2 existing things and making a third thing that may be sterile. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what evolution is. That's not what anybody interested in genetics would want.
100%.
So you would not want to cross 2 things that already exist. You want to take maybe you could take something that already exists and enhance it.
Right.
and you know how to do that. Hey, if I just, it's like when you buy an old car as a kid, when you're a teenager and you buy an old car, you're looking, your parents are looking at the rusty old piece of junk that you're spending your money on, but you are looking at what you can make this into. Well, at least I don't know about the kids today. I'm 60 something years old. So I mean, in my day,
Hey, we're not much younger than you.
People would buy these muscle cars, and they would have a very different vision in their head about what they're going to do with this 1971 satellite Sebring Plus. They're picturing it with a hood scoop and a blower and the massive tires that they think they're going to, and the side pipes and all that. They think they're going to do all of this. Everybody else sees this horrible rusted monstrosity, but you see what you can make it into, right? So anybody that wants to do this genetic engineering thing, they can start with they can start with one of us, and they're thinking about what can we do with this. Let's start with this template and go from there.
That's the lore.
There was a sci-fi movie that was recently out that I've been thinking the same thing since long before I thought I knew there was a comic book involved. Rocket Raccoon. Rocket Raccoon is a wonderful example. Raccoons have all of the basic generality to be super successful. They have hands. They have the musculature and bones in their wrists that they're able to do this with their wrists, which very few other mammals can do. Mm-hmm. Right? So they have the ability to walk bipedally. They have the ability to have an opposable thumb. They can, with just minor enhancements, they could be they're the only non-primate that could possibly take over after us in a form like ours. It's based on the tetrapod form, of course. We were talking about aliens. We'd get much more in depth into all the possibilities in that. But if you wanted to start with genetic modification, look at Rocket. They start with something that has all of the general features. The problem with raccoons, and I asked a geneticist about this. We were at a public meeting. There was a geneticist who was talking about all of these things, and I brought up the question about raccoons. Why the fuck don't raccoons evolve? Raccoons are procyonids, which means that they're like basal to dogs. They're like a living fossil. They are still in the form that the ancestors of dogs were back when dogs could still climb trees, back when dogs still had hands. You find there's only 2 or 3 different species of these things. I mean, like there's the coatimundi in South America, but in the northern part of the continent, or excuse me, the hemisphere, raccoons. Asia, North America, raccoons. They look the same. Why don't they evolve? And he said, well, it's interesting that you asked that question because we checked for that, and we found that raccoons have an absurdly slow mutation rate.
They're perfect.
Yeah, it doesn't evolve. It's the perfect thing to evolve, and it doesn't evolve.
Right.
So if you want to make something, that would be the next race of bipedal humanoids, but you don't want to start with a primate, go to a raccoon.
I love
it. But you can't naturally do it because the mutation rate is so slow. That's annoying.
It is annoying, but
when you get past that, when you change that mutation rate to where the mutation rate is at a normal rate again, a normal pace. Now you can have them where they lose their thumb because they're not arboreal anymore. You've now advanced them to specificity. You've made them specific to one thing. They're not generalized anymore. When you specialize in one thing, you lose that jack of all trades ability to do all things. You can do many, many different things, just none of them really well. If you're going to do one thing really well, it means that you suck at everything else you do. It's just the give and take. Yes. So you started with these procyonids, and you reduced that thumb down to it's useless. So you only got the 4 toes anymore. And then you don't walk on the hand anymore. You walk on the toes, and that gives you a little extra spring. So when you go up digigrade,
how are you going to get into those digigrade?
When you go up digigrade instead of plantigrade, well, that gives you an element of spring in your step that enables more speed. And so what you've done is you've taken a raccoon a procyanid, a proto dog, and you've made it into a dog. And making it into a dog means that it's now hypervelocity. It's a thing that can run as fast as humans can run when it's jogging. It can reach our top speed when it's jogging. And when it wants to reach its top speed, it means you're dead. These things can reach 40 miles an hour. They're super predators. And they use attack coordinated pack hunting strategies that are very similar to ours, which is why we became their friends. Wolves or dogs, I should say, and people were hunting the same way in the same place for thousands of years and eventually just decided, hey, we're both social species. Why the fuck don't we team up?
And it worked.
Yeah.
There's a
But it
symbiotic
started-
kind of aspect to that relationship with another species. And
If you've ever
Well, we're-
watched how
go ahead.
if you've ever watched how African wild dogs hunt, they do have very sophisticated, coordinated hunting strategies. Once
They
they're
hunt in
out, once they're
packs.
upon you, there is the fact that they can go 40 miles an hour. That's terrifying enough. But the fact that they have already planned without a language which direction you're going to take and how they're going to intercept you and how you're fucked once they've targeted you, they're terrifying, much like people.
Wow. Well,
I've got a question in relation to that. With respect to a secular standpoint, for instance, or the atheistic standpoint, how might the discovery of, say, extraterrestrial life or interdimensional life, how might that contribute to, say, the reevaluation of human morality, which I hear you talk about often in many of the content and interviews that you do? How might this contribute to the reevaluation of human morality and ethics on a cosmic scale?
I don't see where human morality is relevant to what you're suggesting. Relevant to the question, I mean.
I knew you were
How
going to
so?
say that.
Yeah, human morality is a mystery to me, and why people keep bringing it up the way that they do. It's not like God promotes morality. It's not like belief in God promotes reality. You've got this thing that, hey, if you do bad things that we arbitrarily decide are bad, but are actually socially perfectly fine, then some indomitable despot is going to spank you for it. And so if you think that if you violate some arbitrary rule, a victimless crime, for example, that you're going to get punished, well, that's not morality. It's understanding why something is moral or immoral, and understanding it. Well, you don't even have to understand why you don't do this. I mean, because most of us, if we had never heard of God in our lives, we still wouldn't be rapists and murderers.
Right.
If
you need a book to tell you what the difference between right and wrong is, or a God, then the problem is a little bit deeper than. Anyway,
under normal circumstances, we understand that we all want to be seen as a hero. We all want to be appreciated, and we know that we can be appreciated. And I'm not talking about the depth of morality. I'm talking about the most superficial aspect of it. We all want to be liked, loved. We don't want to be feared necessarily, except maybe by a small group of people that were already doing evil. Right. And what is evil? Evil doesn't mean, hey, you're a man and you're dressing like a woman. I've arbitrarily decided that's evil because I feel that's icky. And so I'm going to make sure everybody kills anybody who puts on a dress. No, that's not it. It's, can we rely on you? Can we trust you? We need to rely on someone. Will it be you? You want to be the person that people can turn to. The people in need, they'll turn to you, that you will be the one to help them. You feel. There's some people who argue that it's not really moral if you get a personal sense of satisfaction out of it, but how can you not? If you sacrifice virtually everything you have, your labor, your money, everything to help someone else because they just need help, and maybe you bitch about it all the time, how much money this is costing you and how much of your time and how inconvenient this all is, you're still deriving some degree of satisfaction from being able to help someone else. You've still got that.
It seems like people who seek leadership roles are the ones that you don't want in that position. It's like people who get satisfaction from being that guy is typically the guy you don't want doing that job. At least that's from my
Exactly.
experience. Right.
Exactly. Likewise, I don't want to be anybody's leader. I would wish that leaders would take counsel from the wise. That would be nice, you know?
Yeah, Picard style. You get everyone's opinion first. You know.
Hey,
Now,
you know,
speaking of these cults of personality in the field of ufology, you have a lot of different schools of thought, different belief systems that is somewhat akin and reminiscent of how religions typically evolve over time. And according to some of these schools of thought in ufology, it's either their way or the highway. Do you see a similarity with respect to how ancient religions, for instance, the Judeo-Christian religions and all the various types of schisms that have resulted from the evolution of these religious perspectives through history? Do you see that similarity happening in the ufology community, for instance? Do you see similarities with that?
I'm sorry, that question got really muddy, especially toward the end. Could you paraphrase that?
Sure. To put it quite simply, there are different schools of thought in the field of ufology, and it's like it's their interpretation, it's their way or the highway, right? And you
Okay.
have ardent followers that are locked into this type of perspective or interpretation. What are the dangers of this type of phenomena with these various cults of personality that arise from this topic?
If I understand you correctly, I mean, I was, let's say, culturally conditioned to be distrustful of authoritarianism. I've met a few people in my life who have said things along the lines of, I have never been wrong. I've met just a couple of people. They're narcissists and dangerous, but they insist they've never been wrong. I can show exactly where they have been wrong and what they've been wrong about, but they'll never admit that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a little concerned about people who are absolute in their positions, who don't take counsel, who can't correct a mistake, who can't say, wow, okay, well, I need to rethink this then. There's some people can't do that. I think that's what you're relating to, is it? Yeah.
I think
To an
so.
extent, yes.
Yeah, I have encountered for myself a couple of times when I have been wrong on something that I held on to for years and realized, wow, that's completely fucked up. Turns out there's no support for that, or turns out I'm wrong about that. Turns out my definition needs to be completely corrected, and I need to take a different direction going forward. And there's other people who celebrate. This is one of the reasons that I hate faith, by the way. People who are strong in their convictions and firm in their beliefs. Well, that means that you're unreasonable. That means you've already judged someone else's case before you've heard the evidence, and no amount of evidence will ever change your mind.
Oh man.
So when I hear critics, when I hear somebody tell me, like I heard today, somebody sent me a message today, wanting to have a serious conversation about me accepting Islam.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah. Now I can be as dismissive as I want to, but anybody that's going to be criticizing anything that I've said on any topic, even the topics that I'm studied on, I mean, I'm ready. If I'm talking about cosmology or philosophy or genetics or something like that, I'm ready to be corrected in a moment, because I haven't studied these adequately enough to know for certain that everything that I say is absolutely correct. On some things, I'm good. I mean, I'm very confident. But I want to be careful that anytime I get a criticism, anytime somebody criticizes me and says that they can prove that I'm wrong, I want to know it.
I think usually I think a paycheck is usually involved, right? Like I've seen a lot of these cults of personalities, especially in the UAP field, where you're like, well, this could be VFX. I'm open to it being real, but I'm also open to it being VFX, and their heads will explode because I think honestly they're preparing to write books, or there's some other like monetary reason why they just can't go there. They're not gonna accept any kind of rational explanation. And
There's a handful of people that if you get famous in the atheist community, and then you declare that you're a Christian now you got money.
Right.
If I were to go rifling through my couch cushions and find Jesus, I would also find myself in a mega church making millions of dollars a year.
Right. Joel Osteen would be
just-
like, get this man on stage.
It's just this issue of ethics,
Yeah.
and logic, because there is somebody who recently declared that, famous atheists who recently declared they're Christian for reasons that don't qualify as Christianity.
Right.
Cognitive dissonance cells.
They don't believe in Jesus. They just call themselves Christian because, hey, I'm running out of money being an atheist who hasn't said a fucking thing about atheism in a decade. It's time for me to make bank. Can I call myself a Christian now so that I can make up for this decade of not doing shit?
It's profits of profit.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and here I am working for a non-profit organization.
Touche. But you are spreading the light of rational thought, skepticism, which is sorely lacking in many of these traditional belief systems. And I think when you offer an alternative perspective that challenges people's preconceived notions, and of course it's going to be uncomfortable for them to consider, but from
they won't.
An outside observer looking outside in, I think both perspectives are needed for a more balanced kind of judgment.
The dog agrees.
I want to get back onto your topic because we are talking about the extraterrestrials, and we have way deviated.
I know. I was about to say the same thing.
Yeah. So I look at the probability. We take a number of things into, like the Drake equation, and there's some other paradox about if there are multiple other
the Fermi paradox.
Thank you, that one. When you as I have applied all of the numbers as best I can, and I don't see where there's a huge paradox in this. If we're talking about the distances and the rates at which communications break down over light years, even radio telescope communications, there's only so much you can do in a few light years before it's unintelligible, right?
With our current level of scientific knowledge, there could be other things we just don't know.
If you're coming
especially
from
with respect to the quantum kind of phenomena with the what's that called, James? The quantum flip, quantum entanglement, instantaneous communication, irregardless of distance, space, and time.
It's a theory.
I think you broke James.
No, I understand what he's saying. I'm just listening. No. I understand that that hypothesis.
Yeah. So I'm trying to stretch my mind as much as I can to envision I look at how different languages even within humanity, within our one species, when you are raised with a different language, you have a different perspective on a lot of things. If you were raised speaking Russian, I studied Russian for a few years, and I would be fully bilingual if it wasn't for fucking Putin.
Очень красиво.
Yeah.
That
Putin
means you're
is
beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, Putin ploho. Yeah, but I was studying Russian daily for years, and then just after a while, I couldn't stand the man anymore, and there was no reason to learn Russian. I was never going to go to Russia.
Yeah, I used to like it.
Not as long as that man exists.
Understand your enemy is the way I looked at it when I studied it, but that was back in the 80s,
Yeah.
Whatever.
So, but you understand, especially if you were studying Russian, you understand the point that I'm having. There's a different perspective that people have. If you were raised in Russia, you have a very different view of authoritarianism than I would. If you were raised in different parts of the United States, you're likely to have a different view of authoritarianism than people raised in other parts of the country. And I spent most of my childhood in Los Angeles in the 1970s. So I have very different perspective than what you get in New
Tubular.
York, you know.
Tubular.
So, and with people in Russia, they have been raised by authoritarians for so long, they think that's the norm, and they have a very negative view of individualism, which, you know, in the United States celebrates individualism. Now,
Oh,
think
yeah,
about
man.
it. You're going outside of that language. Just if you were just talking about like Vulcans or something, and they come speaking a different language, already the perspective is going to be enormously different. And that's if they're humans with pointed ears. We're not even going to talk about, you know, the iron-based blood, because that's bullshit. The Vulcans are human. There's no way that you would have something so different that one of them has hemoglobin and the other one has hemocyanin, and yet they look exactly the same.
That was
That's
for
absurd.
budget purposes. It's cheaper to put a pointy ear on somebody than make an amorphous blob with tentacles.
Well, remember the aliens from The Simpsons. I love this one scene
Krang.
where Krang, and I can't remember the other one's name, but
Kodos.
Kodos, thank you. And Marge Simpson asks, "Well, why are you speaking English?" And they say, "We're not. We're speaking our own native language. It's just by an astonishing set of coincidences, our two languages evolved to be exactly the same."
Right. Right.
The same kind of thing would apply genetically. So a lot of people have argued that when you try to come up with an original alien, is it going to come out looking more like a bee or an octopus or a mantis shrimp or whatever? You know, people get that's absurd. If dinosaurs still existed today, they would be bipedal and have hands and look like people. They would just look like reptiloid people. But it's not like we're a pinnacle. It's not like we're the most efficient form. You know, you're just coming at it from the bias of your ancestral perspective. And so if you were raised in a community that has always been under authoritarians, or if you're raised in a community that has always celebrated individualism, and the structure of your language also is such that it's going to change your perspective on how you view certain things. Now imagine that you started out as an individual, as a separate species entirely.
But well, see, that's the thing. We just don't know. There's just so many questions we don't know. I'd like to go back to something that you said earlier, specifically like when it comes to like the cultural impression, right? So I had an experience. I saw a thing. My downstairs neighbor saw relatively the same thing with differences. I started researching the phenomenon and finding all these commonalities. But the thing is, we don't know what any of this is. Like, I'm very curious if this ever does anything come to light. Is it DNA based? Is panspermia a thing? If so, you know, what are the implications there? And I'm curious what your take is on why are there so many commonalities in these experiences that people are having? Like, as far as abduction scenarios are concerned, like there seems to be a very high correlation to DNA extraction, a certain type of look, and you know, a certain relatively similar set of experiences. What do you think? What's going on here?
Well, were we already recording when we mentioned the European versus American versus Asian version of aliens? Right, this is all cultural.
So it's all cultural.
Yeah, entirely. So if there was an alien species that was going to, you know, send probes, or I mean,
they might be human. We don't know.
Let's look at the likelihood. If they have the ability of doing radio telescope communications, and they have the ability of interstellar space,
but you're
travel,
assuming extraterrestrial. What if it's terrestrial based or human based? Or we again, there's just so much we don't know. That's a huge assumption. Like, they're from another star.
I tend to compare multiple hypotheses at once, rather than believe any one particular one. I'm just saying, going on if we assume that we're talking about extraterrestrials, then we're going to be talking about something that is so alien that it would pale in comparison. When we try to create aliens, we look to invertebrates, and then if we want to go even more alien, we look to marine life. Right. Well,
but things
if
are
you're looking at another planet,
alien.
If you're looking at another planet, then you have to go even worse. Now, you mentioned bilaterally symmetrical and DNA.
That's why I don't think it's extraterrestrial. I don't think it's off-world at all. I think this phenomena is strictly terrestrially based. Whether it's from here,
I'm going to accept that in interstellar life forms, that the advanced life forms would likely achieve bilateral
Bilateral.
symmetry. Yeah, I
Okay.
can see that. That doesn't mean that DNA is going to be consistent everywhere,
Right? I agree.
because DNA is not the only type of genetic material we have on this planet, right? And I
Interesting.
think there are 4. It's just that viruses are RNA, and most and all some viruses are DNA also, but all actual organisms are DNA on this planet. It's possible that there could be a different type of genetic material and still eventually be bilaterally symmetrical. Does that mean that they are animals? No, because now you've got another set of criteria. To be an animal, you have to be a multicellular eukaryote with an internal digestive system. That the fact that something can get up and move around doesn't necessarily mean that it's multicellular, nor that it has a digestive system.
Forgive me here, but it seems like you're making an assumption that a lot of people make that kind of, I don't want to say rubs me the wrong way, but everybody assumes that this is something from another star. And I keep trying to
Multiple
help.
hypotheses.
Right. I
Your other one.
want people to open their minds to the possibility that there's just another option, that this is terrestrially based, that maybe there's something else going on, not necessarily from super far distance, because I just don't find it plausible. Like you said, radio telescopes, like physically getting from one star to another, all that just seems really implausible to me. My rational brain says there's got to be another explanation. There's got to be some other answer. I just don't see things going across that kind of distance, period. It just doesn't seem likely. Now,
compare that to your alternate hypotheses.
Well, I don't know.
Time travel.
Or undiscovered, ecosystems,
A shadow biome.
Shadow biome,
that
right?
they could be ultra terrestrial, that they've always existed.
They've always been
existed here in some kind of other type of frequency, or some kind of interdimensional aspect.
It almost seems more plausible than being able to travel a distance, because if there is DNA extraction going on, that means there must be some kind of compatibility. And if there is some kind of compatibility, that speaks to me that there's got to be some kind of local thing going on, some kind of local phenomenon, not something super far away.
Now, I think Mr. Rock,
this could be crazy.
What James is probably alluding to. Have you seen what the Mexican Congress had released a couple of months ago with respect to those Peruvian mummies?
They're made of
and
sand.
All the controversy with respect to the scientific analysis, the DNA work that's been done, where they've posited, the director of the hospital, where they've done these comprehensive scans, that these Peruvian mummies have a certain percentage of reptilian DNA, unknown DNA, and DNA that's somewhat similar to humans. I know you're laughing.
No, but that guy's been proven a hoaxer.
We're talking about what is the probability that something would be bilaterally symmetrical. Okay, that's fair. If you want to get into like tetrapods, that's absurd. How their language and our language evolved exactly the same, that's an absurdity, right? We get that. But now you're talking about an equal absurdity. Reptilians. That means that not only is it a mammal, not only is it a multicellular eukaryote with an internal digestive tract, not only is it a vertebrate, a cranial vertebrate. Right, but all of these, it's also a tetrapod, which all the criteria that for being a tetrapod. Now you've also gotten into that it is reptilian, which means that it is a diapsid, which means that it has a double temporal fenestra. How ridiculous number of coincidences do we need to build up?
Right.
And so when people tell me that these independently evolved reptiloids from the Sirius star system have somehow assumed human guise and infiltrated the Illuminati, then I'm thinking, well, you know what? You need a very comfortable room and some nice medication and maybe pictures of flowers.
And to be clear, George, that Mexican, that whole phenomenon, that guy Jaime, the dude, first of all, it came from an accredited university, which lost its accreditation after that happened. And not only that, they've done multiple scans on these things, and it was a hodgepodge of bones from various different creatures, Earth-based. Like, it's a total hoax. We can never bring that up again. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
but no, but I want to entertain
I'm
your
just
other
kidding.
hypothesis. And here's this
Yes.
one is the bigger problem. So I was going with the more plausible, the extraterrestrial. Your other
That's more
hypothesis.
plausible than terrestrial based, you think?
Yeah, anachronists, yes. So the first problem is, despite these vast distances, we have means of communication, we have means of travel. It's hugely inefficient, but it can be done. There's at least ways that we can say hello to each other. And that would be the first thing that they would do. If there were extraterrestrial beings, they wouldn't be visiting this place before saying hi. You tend to call people before you come over.
Why? What if that's not? What if you don't care? Like, oh, I just need their DNA, or I just need something. Why do I got to involve myself with them?
What is your
It's just a
inclination? And you're
hassle.
gonna, if I need a license from the state for one of these, for example, I can either call Austin and find out what's required in that, or I could drive there. Which one are you more likely to do first?
I see what you're saying. Again, we're going back to the like extraterrestrial answer. I just can't get past this whole phenomenon, and all the research that I've done, to me personally, points to a terrestrial based phenomenon, whatever that
Okay,
means.
well, let's look at that for a moment.
Either it's a cultural thing, or I don't know. Yeah, let's do.
Then let's look at that.
Okay.
Okay, in this one galaxy, we have a couple hundred billion stellar systems.
I have no doubt there's life out there. I'm not saying there's not life
So-
out there.
So
I'm just talking about the
we're
abduction
already
phenomenon.
already looking at the probability of extraterrestrial life. There's a statistical certainty. That's just this one
Yeah.
galaxy. Within
Agreed.
this one galaxy, there's a statistical certainty that there's other extraterrestrial life. When you look at the Drake equation,
Mhm.
the possibility of that terrestrial life having radio telescope communications is very, very slim.
Mhm.
So your Fermi paradox
And the great
kind of
filters.
falls apart when you compare it to the Drake equation, really.
Yep.
And when you then compare how far apart something can be in the galaxies with the type of communication we have, to say that's just the communication. That's with radio waves. That's to
Mhm.
say nothing of space travel, which is hugely more expensive in time
Right.
and everything else. But then you want to bring in this other thing, which ignores all of that and adds literally a whole other dimension
What is
to
the
what
thing
could
we're
be
adding?
going on here. What?
What is the thing we're adding?
Time travel.
Oh, no, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm not necessarily saying that's the answer. I just
You
think that
said it was terrestrially based, and earlier you did say time
Right.
travelers.
I mentioned that there is some lore speaking to time travel. There's people saying that. I'm not saying that. I just feel like
Okay.
this phenomenon that
Well,
I
let's
experienced,
entertain that then.
the time travel one.
I had such an issue
I don't
trying
know.
to be a logical, rational person as a child because I was raised by people who seemed determined not to let skepticism exist. They thought that if you're a skeptic, then you're a cynic, and you miss the bigger
No.
picture that only believers can understand. And so one of the books that they gave me at 12 years old was it Zachariah Sitchin?
Yeah, I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about. The Anunnaki and all that stuff.
Yes. The I forget what the name of the book was.
I know what you're talking about. I forget too.
Yeah, but it was like 1974, and so it had to do with the Nazca lines, and how these extraterrestrials were creating these huge images in the ground so that they could have runways, as if you would need runways if you have this kind of. And these are time travelers, so apparently they go into space and then travel through time and then come back into the. Let's just consider that for a moment.
Okay.
Why would you only land in South America?
I'm not a big proponent of the time travel thing, to be honest. I don't know. I don't know why you would land in South America.
Well, there's a lot of good arguments
food?
for why, if we're talking about extraterrestrial beings, the UFOs, the flying saucers, the UAPs, whatever you want to call them.
Something's happening.
There's three major options for what they are. They're extraterrestrials, they're time travelers,
Or they're us.
or third option, and this is kind of the scariest one,
Military.
well beyond what we're aware of.
Right.
Now,
I'd agree with that.
I remember a bunch of UFO sightings that kind of matched the SR-71.
The Black
When
Widow.
they finally when they
1960s.
finally
It was
admitted
a revolutionary aircraft.
There's also the shadow biome theory. That's the fourth one.
when they finally admitted that the SR-71 existed, they admitted that it had existed
right
for 20
Back-
some odd years at least.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, okay, well, if you're going to admit now, you've kept it secret for 20 years, you're going to admit now that this thing exists, this thing that can go Mach 3, this thing that can go on the edge of space, Mach 3 plus, and it can go on the edge of space, and all of these things. If you're going to admit now that that exists, the only reason you admit that you would admit that that exists is because you have a replacement that is
Something
way
better. The Tic Tac, James, from the Nimitz incident.
We
You know what I'm
don't
talking about?
Yeah,
Mr.
but
Rob.
nobody knows what that is, right? No one knows what that is.
And where did the technology for anti-gravitics come from?
We don't know that
We
it's
had a
anti-gravity.
We had a house
They-
in the mountains of Arizona, in an alpine forest area of Arizona. The nearest town was actually called Alpine. And they used to do a lot of Air Force testing over this area. So we got to see a lot of aircraft with no windows, or aircraft with black painted windows.
Drones?
And yeah, we got to see a lot of that. I mean, decades ago. 30, 40 years ago, we're seeing completely robotic planes flying at ridiculously low altitudes. So we know that the government is not well.
Transparent,
Yeah,
to say the least.
we at least have established fact that the SR-71 already existed and was already in use a full 2 decades before they admitted that they had the thing.
Same with the F-117 or the B-2. You know,
and when they finally admit that they have it, we have to wonder what else came along to replace it
as its replacement. And on that note, Mr. Ra, in terms of this disclosure aspect, we see a lot of it happening in the legacy media, as well as social media, with the David Grush hearing, congressional hearings, the Schumer amendment. I was wondering, as a rational, secular, free thinker, how might the existence of extraterrestrial life or interdimensional life, with disclosure, how might that challenge traditional belief and religious systems, including those discussed in, say, the atheist community? How might that shift the paradigm of thinking on a global scale?
It would be irrelevant to the atheist community, and it pretty much would be irrelevant to the theistic community too, because theists don't care what the reality is. They just don't.
The Catholics said it's all God's creatures.
If you were to prove that extraterrestrials exist, they would write it into their systems somehow.
Right.
They will say up until then that that we're the only planet, we're the reason that the universe exists, or as some theologians have already said, that if life exists on other planets, then they must have had their own deluge, they must have had their own crucifixion scenario, they must have had their own Jesus.
Yeah, the mental gymnastics that they'd have to do, these religious pundits.
Or
did
demons.
Jesus die for the sins of the aliens too?
Yeah, they would make them demons.
There was an argument in the Middle Ages that the people on the other side of this world would have had to have had their own deluge and crucifixion, their own Jesus. The antipodes, the people who lived where their feet are opposite ours.
The antipodes, I love that.
Yeah, that they had to have their own Jesus because they're on the other side of the world. So this is just the way theists think, although I'm hesitant to use that word.
Yeah, and I agree that atheists, it wouldn't change anything because people get that big misconception. Atheists are closed-minded. In fact, it's the opposite. They're open-minded. I don't know, therefore I don't have an answer. But if you show me some evidence that's provable, well, then there you go. So that doesn't change much. And theists, like you said, they're either going to write it in or they're going to demonize it. I've seen a lot of that too, where they're just like, this is a demon. You're talking about Satan. You saw something in the sky. It's a demon. Like, period. That's it.
Exactly. And they're going to say it with absolute conviction, because that's the thing I really hate about faith, is when you when you say that this is the truth because I said so,
Right.
and then you're not gonna you don't care what the real truth is.
Well, what do you think's going on?
I'm gonna have to. You are too active. I'm gonna have to put this.
But he's
thing out
great.
for-
It keeps us engaged. It's like people get bored listening. They're like, "But dude's got a snake. Come on."
Yeah, I sent a message to my wife a while back saying, "Come get this thing," but apparently she didn't see this, and I have to put him up somewhere without like leaving the room. So I'm going to go grab another beer and I'm going to put him in this.
Yeah, take your
no
time.
worries. I'm really curious what Aaron thinks is going on, right? Because clearly something's up. We've got pretty credible people like Commander Fravor and some other pretty credible people. It sounds like he's open to extraterrestrial answers more so than terrestrial based answers, maybe, which is surprising.
But I'm also hearing that there's a limitation in terms of how they could travel immense distances from star system to star system.
I have to
but
agree with that.
Here's the thing: when we first started to learn how to fly, it was said back then, with the Wright brothers and the evolution of flight, that we would never surpass the sound barrier. That it would be physically impossible to do so. Even with the invention of the Model T, the first car, they said, hey, if you go above 40 miles an hour, the human body would be crushed.
There will always be breakthroughs. Of course, we're going to have tons and tons of breakthroughs throughout the rest of time, I'm sure, and more. But
there were people 150 years ago or 200 years ago who were complaining that the human body could not physically withstand speeds in excess of 20 miles an hour.
20.
Or excuse me, maybe it was 40.
Your brain will pop.
Yeah. You can't have locomotives because humans can't withstand going 40 miles an hour.
Right.
Because their horses at that time couldn't go 40 miles an hour.
So what do you think's going on, Aaron, when it comes to... It seems like there's clearly something up. I mean, there's kind of two prongs to this. There's the physical aspect, right? We've got Commander Fravor and all these pretty credible, Air Force people with radar data, with videotape and eyewitness reports. And then you've got the not so credible data, people like me who had personal experiences that are completely unverifiable, but yet share a commonality. And I feel like there's some sort of relation going on. Do you have any idea or thoughts or hypothesis about what's going on now? Like, what is this all about?
As I said, I like to compare multiple hypotheses at once. And any one of these could be true. And there's some of them that I would love to be, if there was true. I would love it if there were extraterrestrials coming to visit us. If we had detected an exoplanet and this exoplanet had radio telecommunications of regular kind of patterns that don't match natural patterns, we would be sending pulsation messages to that planet. We would be looking for different types of knocking on the wall, like when you realize there's a sound in the next room and you're in a prison, you're like tap 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 tap, and you wait for somebody to go tap 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 back. It's the same thing we'd be doing.
But light years, hundreds of light years. I mean, even if you tap, by the time that tap comes back, you're already long dead.
It's better that with light speed travel of transmission on radio waves than to load up into a fucking spaceship.
For sure. Yes.
100%.
100%.
Yeah. So what's the likelihood? Is it extraterrestrials visiting us? No. They would more likely be establishing all kinds of communications to figure out everything about us before they sent anybody here.
Well, you could use a probe. I mean, that's what we do. We built, Voyager and various things. It's much safer to send a robotic thing than it is to send yourself, right?
Even that would already have, I mean, we're talking about stuff that's close by.
4 light years. Like what's Alpha Centauri? It's like 4 light years?
4 light years.
4 light years.
Yep.
So what would that take to send a probe? If it takes 4 years to send a transmission,
20, 30 years.
It takes 4 years to send a transmission, 4 years to send it to get the transmission back. So you're looking at 8 years, despite whatever processing time in the interim and all of the degradation or attenuation that goes on in there, right? But now compare that to sending something physically there, because now we're talking about a couple of centuries from now before we get a response. Right?
20 years to get there, maybe, for Alpha Centauri.
4 light years?
There's some talk about using
What's the
laser-based
fastest
propulsion.
thing we've ever built?
Well,
The Voyager probes.
Sure, but they're talking about new techniques that involve lasers. So what you do is you're using a laser to speed something up. Still, it takes a long ass time. It's a long time.
Okay. So then another hypothesis, time travel. Again, I would absolutely love to believe that time
Sure.
travel is possible.
Me too.
The shit we could do. I want to visit the Permian. I want to go camping in the most alien world I can think of, and that's the Permian. I would love for that to be real.
We're not ready.
wouldn't-
We'd be
I
nuking
wouldn't-
each other.
I wouldn't care about South America 4,000 years ago.
The food.
4,000 years ago?
Beans were good back then. No, but I hear what you're saying.
No, beans are better now.
Yeah.
It's not even corn wasn't good
Right,
4,000
right.
years ago. So if you're going to have time travelers, why the fuck would they have these runways represented by pictures of birds or whatever?
I'm not a big proponent of the Nazca lines, so I can't really go. I'm not an authority in that
None
space.
of that makes any sense. There are some anomalies that make me think. I mean, there's a medieval painting that's got pictures of spaceships in it, and
There's a few of those.
really look like spaceships. There's another medieval rendering, and I wish I could remember all of them off the top of my head. There's somebody in a spacesuit, and that's a real damn spacesuit. I mean, in detail, that looks like a damn spacesuit.
The Nuremberg woodcut.
There's another one that depicts a helicopter, a fighter jet.
That's all Egyptian.
That was an Egyptian hieroglyphic.
Yeah, that's all Egyptian stuff.
Yeah, again, so there's stuff to make you there's things to make you go as Arsenio Hall would say, 20 some odd years, 20, 30 years ago.
What's your hypothesis that you're entertaining right now as far as our most current understanding is? Would you say it's human military or
if you take into account all of the historical anthropological kind of evidence that's endemic across different cultures with respect to the portrayal of supposed beings or this helicopter or whatever in Egyptian hieroglyphics, how do you reconcile this entire anthropological history across various cultures?
I don't have a way of saying. I would love, all I can do is entertain different possibilities, and I don't like to look at anything in terms of very often. Just as little as possible do I like to turn to absolutes. I prefer to look at what is most probable or best indicated by the most reliable evidence and weigh those.
So what do you think? Yeah, going back to James' question, what do you think is going on when you consider the preponderance of all of this stuff?
Okay, I'm going to say
not even all of it. Let's go with the tic tac or just the tic tac.
Okay, the time travel option would be my preference. That's the one I would prefer because that leaves options open for me. Once this technology gets available to the regular public, I would love to. I would love to see a photography group from National Geographic shoot back in time 225 million years. That would be fucking fantastic. I want to watch that documentary.
Yeah, right. Feathered dinosaurs
and all of the follow-up stuff. That's the stuff that would be my favorite. That's also I think the least likely. I have tried to wrestle my head around how time travel could be done, and I can't come up with anything, so I'm just personally frustrated in that. That would be my favorite one, the one that I would most like to be true.
But that one's
I
out.
think it's the least likely to be true.
Okay.
Extraterrestrials, second up. And again, for reasons we've already discussed,
tough.
I don't think so. And so the third and sadly by far the most likely is human technology, and maybe not necessarily ours.
Right. Well, I have the military industrial complex. Let's just assume for a moment that they have some really mind-blowing tech they are never going to disclose that, right? Like, even if it was, you know, paradigm shifting, earth shattering, like, wow, free energy for everyone, that is so disruptive that the chances of them ever giving that up, Congress can put bills forward and they can try and force their hand all they want. But if I was Lockheed Martin and I was sitting on that tech, the crimes committed to keep it secret, the change in just the oil industry alone, not to mention everything else, what it would incur, the changes. It's just, I don't see it happening. I just don't think they're ever going to reveal that stuff.
So let's
I'd love to be
look at
wrong.
it a different way. Let's look, and I agree with you completely, but let's look at it a different way. You have one aspect of human endeavor that is entirely pro-science, like research and development. We need something that has results. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. It doesn't matter what the fuck. Can you produce the numbers? Can you do the performance? Can you make the thing work? Right? So we're entirely outcome driven and infinitely financed. And I love this line out of Independence Day, the movie, when they said, well, how do you fund something like this? And then the guy says, well, you don't really think that they spent $600 for a toilet seat, $500 for a hammer.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, there's black budgets galore.
You wouldn't even have to be that extreme to hide where all this fucking money goes.
$1 trillion.
There's so many other ways around it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to hide where major amounts of money goes.
Indeed.
So you've got this one aspect of, let's say, the U.S. government that is completely detached from other avenues, in that it's not
private enterprise, not the government. Lockheed, Raytheon, those guys.
It's not religious. It's not political. It's entirely outcome driven. It's all looking at the numbers and performances and how can we improve that. It's absolutely scientific and unbridled, financed beautifully. They're going to be in the last 30 to 40 years, just that long.
Yep.
Look what they could do if that was their actual motivation and they had the funding to do it. And now let's look at outside countries. If our people don't know what the fuck, there's a chance that either they're not in the prime positions to know what the fuck, or there's a different nationality that does.
We test on our own soldiers all the time. They don't care. Like some top brass, F-16 pilots flying along, and they buzz him with this weird tech, and he freaks out. Do they really?
There was a
care?
time. I got to tell you, there was a time when I was proud to be an American, and then I started finding out shit our country did and does
to its own people and soldiers.
Yeah.
So of course they might.
Tuskegee experiments, for example.
I think it's
CIA funneling crack into the ghetto.
If it's human
yeah,
tech,
and you remember the thing about the syphilis experiments in the black community, there are things the United States has just openly engaged in, and they're never going to get called out for it.
No,
it's just
Agreed.
too big and powerful. And now it's all established fact. They're like, oh yeah, we know that the United States did this, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Right. So
you're not going to get
no justice.
You're not going to get damages.
Right. Right. And that's one of the reasons I think disclosure is going to be much harder than people think. Like people are, like the Schumer Amendment and all these like big government pushes and bills, but you can't force Raytheon or Lockheed Martin to admit this stuff. Even if they're like, all right, we'll pay the $1 billion fine. It's still worth it for them to pay that fine than actually disclose anything. I just don't see it happening. I'd love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong.
Yeah.
But I think
so
Americans have.
The most likely is that it is our own technology. And when I say our own, I mean humanity.
Human.
I don't think that Russia.
No way.
In the Soviet Union, it was possible. There were aspects of the Soviet Union that were all about producing advanced science. They were extremely limited even then, but there was at least a subset of the Soviet Union that was interested in scientific endeavor. The Chinese, much more capable.
Sure. They still don't have the budget we do, though. The American budget blows everyone out of the water by magnitudes, order of magnitudes. That's why I think it's ours. in our own
It,
jet
it, it
fighters.
is. I would agree that it's most likely ours, because Americans collectively. I mean, when you look at uh, as you say, the top echelons, the different aspects of the leadership, and not necessarily the governance, but certainly in the corporations and such,
Private.
they start keeping secrets from themselves. I've worked for companies where the information that I'm sharing with the customers and everything is
Siloed.
known to be false because I'm told to mislead. And then I figure out that, so this was the actual thing, but I'm told this other thing. And so if that's just happening within a single multinational that I happen to work for, just imagine what it would be like for a company that is
Defense agent.
over governments,
Right.
that
Right.
works with multiple governments and doesn't give a fuck which government it is.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It concerns me. And I see and I don't want to be the like guy who poos on all the, hope, because there's definitely a lot of people that are very excited right now. Like, oh my gosh, UAP disclosure is happening. And I want to believe, I want it to be real, but they're never going to let it out. I just don't see it. I want to be wrong. Someone show me I'm wrong, please.
Well, look
I
what
don't
happened
care
with
if
the
I'm wrong or
Manhattan
right.
Project. They kept that secret for such a long time. There were over 100,000 people working on that, right? Nobody knew about it at the time until we exploded the atomic bomb over Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
I had this conversation 40 years ago. So it's not going to have the impact. It's not going to have the impact to say this now, but when they came up with the movie Oppenheimer, where they now the national public has this movie that says it, because if it wasn't in a movie, then nobody's going to fucking know, right?
Right.
But 40 years ago, certain egg-headed nerds like myself were aware that when they did that first test, they thought, hey, there's a reasonable possibility this will blow up the whole fucking world.
They actually thought that was a possibility, and they still did it.
Yeah.
Even with the Large Hadron Collider, when they turned it on for the first time, they thought, hey, it would create a black hole that would suck the Earth in once the particles started to collide.
Well, tiny percentage possibility. Worth the risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that we're having this conversation because I don't have time to watch movies or TV shows like ever at all. But I'm also a huge Godzilla nerd.
Oh, my son he is too. Nice.
So I did watch the Monarch Legacy of and I'm sadly disappointed that, again, like forever, the monster parts are stupid. But at least in the Monarch Legacy of Monsters thing, it's not as bad yet as what the last movie was, where it's a hollow Earth.
No.
And that fluoridation was a communist plot and all that. You remember that? Godzilla versus Kong was such a bad movie.
Yeah.
just in every way.
It's a communist plot to subvert our natural bodily fluids. That's from, what that's from. Deep cut.
Dr. Strangelove, yes.
Yes, correct.
Not lost on. I'm old enough to remember that one.
I think
it was frustrating to me that the girl who played that, Millie Bobby Brown, that I've read a number of things that she actually believes that the hollow Earth and the fluoridation is a communist plot thing.
It makes me sad.
1974, I'm 12 years old, and my mother tells me that getting fluoride toothpaste promotes communism. Fuck, Mom, why are you so damn dumb?
Then how do you explain all the rotting teeth in Russia? But anyway.
Yeah, so the three of us having great fun speculating wildly with almost no information.
Right.
Carl Sagan, who if I ever had a spiritual mentor, it would be Carl Sagan. If there was anybody that guided my way of thought, it was him.
Saganism.
Extraordinary beliefs require extraordinary evidence. So what do you think of his protege, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's just as skeptical as you are with respect to the UAP and the extraterrestrial hypotheses?
I am proud to say that I never met Carl Sagan. I did meet Neil deGrasse Tyson,
Nice.
and Sagan's personal friend, James Randi. I have James Randi's phone number in my
Wow.
phone. I've been to his house a number of times.
Huge.
We've had dinner together a number of times in different places. And he was always super sweet to me. He recognized me because I don't quite look like everybody.
So
So
you've
I
had
mean,
the
it was
same
easy.
look for a good while.
We would show up in different places, and he would recognize me, and he was very cordial with me, and I absolutely loved him. The last time I called him, sadly, very close to the end of his life, the last time I called him, he didn't remember.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so, but you know, people get that way. You know, my own mother is kind of that way now.
What were you about to say? You're like, hey, between the three of us, with very little information, you're about to say something.
Carl Sagan said this beautiful thing about Venus. And I love the analogy that he makes, because it is an analogy, but it's a factual statement, but it's also an analogy. He talks about how you see that you can't see any of the surface features on Venus because it has such a thick atmosphere. Well, if it has a thick atmosphere, then it's likely, you know, it's very swampy. And so if it's a swampy kind of a place, then there's you know, it's kind of like a primordial kind of like maybe dinosaurs, you know. And so they describe, for all the reasons that they make these assumptions. Well, all of the humidity and the fog and everything. Well, they come to dinosaurs, and so he comes up with, he says, what was the observation? Couldn't see a thing. What's the assumption? Dinosaurs.
Right. Well, that's like us right now. The three of us can't see a thing, and we're making. Although I did see a thing. So that's the part that really
No,
brought me to
you
this whole thing.
didn't.
Well, I saw
You
something,
didn't.
and so did my downstairs neighbor in the same night. Like, what the
You
heck
and your
happened?
downstairs neighbors. Now think about this.
What do you think happened? I want to know your take on this.
I knew you
Does
would
this
go. I knew you
happen?
would go this route, James.
I know.
You didn't
Does
see
I'm
this
ready.
anything. It
happen,
was a
say,
delusion.
with, let's say, does this happen with half the a third of the population? It has a
I
third
don't-
of the population
Shared
shared
a dream?
dreams with
Probably.
their,
Honestly, I don't
Hundreds
know.
of millions of people. That's 3 to 5% of the world's population. That's
Have-
100 millions of people.
have hundreds of millions have
I don't
have
know.
a fifth of have a tenth
I
of the
don't know.
population of the planet shared. Let's get more exclusive. Out of any two people who knew each other in the same night, how often does anybody share a dream?
I don't know.
Out of 8 billion people, how many of those people shared the same dream? Standard gray aliens. Standard, let's focus on that word for a moment. Standard gray aliens had the same dream with their neighbor. Virtually the same. Oh, I was abducted. I was anally probed, whatever the fuck it was.
Well, we both tried to grab them, and they fell down like marionettes.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And so, did you both watch the same sci-fi movie that night?
Oh,
Were you both eating the same nachos
Believe
the
me,
night before?
no. I wish that it was that easy.
Okay, what do you make it? What do you take into account of, say, the miracle? And I hate to use this word, the miracle of
wanna know his
Fatima,
take
where
on
it
it.
was
But I want to know his
observed
take on
by
what
tens
happened.
of thousands of people. It was
James, let me
photographed.
put it to you another way. There was a time when I would have said that I had seen gargoyles, 3 foot tall, hexapods, semi-reptilian reptilian humanoids. Think about
With
how
other
ridiculous
people.
that is. With bat wings and tails.
With other people,
Right.
More than your set of eyes, 2 sets of eyes.
More than my set. Yeah, and if I went into all of the details about how my friend and I battled these things, I'm like,
And your friend remembers it and corroborates it.
but here's the thing. I thought for all my life, for 20 years, that if I were to find him again, that he would absolutely corroborate what I said.
But that's
But
irrelevant
when
to
I
my
found
experience.
him, he didn't.
I could call
corroborate
Carson
that.
right now and get
Why?
well.
Why didn't he? Why didn't he? What did he attribute it to? What did he reductionist kind of materialist kind of explanation did he have?
I don't know what his explanation is. All I know is that I remember something that was life-changing for me and that he didn't remember at all.
Well,
So
Carson
now I
does
have,
remember.
again, multiple hypotheses. And one of them includes that I just might have made the whole thing up.
So you think I'm making this up?
That's one of the possibilities.
Well, Carson remembers it. He remembers it slightly different than I do. We did not share drugs or foods or movies, media, because I explored that too. It's like, did we watch any movies recently? Did we have any conversations recently?
I know some people that can hook you up to where you can have dreams like that almost on demand.
So
I'm not into that myself because when I tried marijuana at 15 years old, somebody laced it with PCP, and I'm kind
lucky
of
you.
glad that they did.
Yeah, I was gonna say, good times.
I'm kind of glad that they did that because it meant that I was not. It meant that I couldn't go to a lot of parties. I couldn't go to midnight movies. Because I would smell. I grew up in the 70s.
So did we. We're old too.
Everybody smoked dope in the 70s. You open the doors to get into the movie theater for a midnight movie, and there would be just columns of smoke would roll out when you.
It's a coincidence. Your answer to me and Carson, it's a coincidence. It just happened by coincidence. That's the only, not the only answer, but the most likely Occam's razor.
There's an orchestrated coincidence. There's a certain number of parameters that you're going to follow. You have a shared media. You're both seeing the North American version of aliens. You've all seen your Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You've all seen the same sorts of input that govern what your idea of an alien is. Yeah.
It wasn't immediately clear to me that these were aliens. It was just an experience that happened that I basically wrote off until I talked to Carson, and then I started to take it more seriously, and that's when I started to do more research in it. I didn't necessarily make the immediate assumption these are aliens. It felt like just
have you ever
unwelcome. It definitely felt unwelcome.
Have you ever looked up the Mandela effect?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's an aspect of this too. How people collectively get something wrong the same way, so that everybody remembers that they all watched the same movie and they remember the classic line from the same movie, except that line isn't in that movie.
So it's how we interpret the data, because we share cultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
And hence there's some kind of confirmation bias.
So that Humphrey Bogart never said, "Play it again, Sam." We all think he did, but he didn't.
Right. Sinbad and Mandela dying in prison and all that stuff. The Berenstain Bears. Yeah.
The Berenstain Bears?
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, some people remember the Berenstain Bears title being... you'll have to look it up. I won't do it justice, but there is something.
I remember I used to read the Berenstain Bears to my kids.
Me too.
You don't look that old.
I'll be 50 in a couple days, and I think George, what are you, 47?
46 this year.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Berenstain
He's
Bears.
Asian. He won't age.
I know, right? So unfair. So unfair.
People think I'm a cradle robber because my wife is part Asian too, and she just stays young forever.
Right. Objects in camera are older than they appear. So
yeah, I have been aware for a long time. I have this mental image of myself, much like Neo when he went into the Matrix, and he was like, why is my hair back and all of that? Because this is your residual mental image. This is what you cast of yourself. I have been aware that I have this mental image of myself for decades because cameras and mirrors lie.
Right.
I'm still cute, goddammit.
Yeah, me too, man.
We can't trust our senses. Our senses are probably the least evidentiary kind of thing that we can rely on.
Can I just bring that up? I thought I've hinted at that a number of times, but thank you.
You have in various other interviews.
Yeah, this is important. There are so many things that I would have attested to. I would have sworn to, had it not already been disproved. When you tell somebody that I know that I left my keys right here. And
And
then
they're
you
not-
find them and you know that nobody moved it. No, this is where you put them there. And it was your fuck up. But you would have sworn, and you did swear,
Mhm.
that this is where they were. And you realized, no, this was my mistake. So just because you remember something doesn't mean that it happened that way.
Well, that's why it was so
You
important that
saw
I
it.
had two people. You know, if
You're
honestly,
an eyewitness. Yeah.
right.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have cut you off there. It
No,
sounded
no,
like
I
you
shouldn't have
wanted-
cut you off, man. I'm sorry. Please.
So I've learned to distrust my own memory. And when I've talked to people, this often happens that I've talked to people that I knew decades ago, and they'll tell me a story about me that's horrifying. Like,
I don't remember
wow.
that.
And I can't adamantly say that that's not what happened. That's just not the way I remember it.
Right. I get you.
And it's just, I'm very, very lucky that I've had very forgiving friends.
Same.
If that's what happened.
Luckily, I talked to my friend within this year about this experience, and we had a long conversation about it. And because I really wanted to dive deep into it, because I took it way more seriously than he did. He seemed scared and just didn't want to talk about it anymore. He's like, you know what? Honestly, I don't want to really think about it or talk about it anymore. And I pushed him, and I was like, no, man, I need closure or some answer, because this is bothering me. Like, I would have easily written it off. Oh, it's just a dream, whatever. But when two people have the same dream at the same night in the same kind of relative position in the building, but different, yet not exactly the same. Definitely there were differences. What the heck is going on here? Like, what is there, like a shared collective unconscious? Is there an actual external event taking place? Like, I just wish there was something happening that I could put my finger on.
There is. Evidently, the Mandela effect proves that there is a shared collective unconsciousness. So
there's no
there are
proof.
a number of people. There have been mass hallucinations where people have gotten the same data wrong that was never supported. It never appeared anywhere, but that a number of people remember it that way. So if that happens, and I don't want to deviate too much from the point of the show. That
I'm curious about what you think about this, because this is one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about. Is like, what?
And I gotta say, since I've never discussed this before, why did you want to talk to me about it?
Well, because I trust you. I've watched a lot of your videos. You're a rational thinker. You're somebody that I look up to as a peer in science and rationality. And
as I've already told you, my friends who knew me back in the day would have a very different opinion.
Well, I know the current Aaron. Not maybe I don't know the 70s Aaron, but the one that I see that is publicly displayed through the medias that I consume is somebody that I would consider worthy of asking, because this is something very strange and unexplainable, and I would love to have a science-based, rationally based hypothesis.
Yeah, I don't know that it's unexplainable.
Explain it to me. Help me. You keep saying
hypotheses, and we won't just necessarily exclude any of them, entirely. Science doesn't prove anything. What happened to George?
I don't know. He turned into a dot. Okay. Oh, he's back.
Yeah. Oh, back again.
Science doesn't prove anything. There's a rule in science that you don't prove anything in the positive sense. And generally, what science does, I mean, at the most, you can disprove something.
Yeah.
But even that is kind of tentative. So we tend to weigh multiple hypotheses at once and consider what is the best supported by the most reliable evidence, and whatever is not supported doesn't warrant further consideration. We can discuss multiple hypotheses that might be proposed, and I'm willing to consider any. There were 4. I discussed 3. And George, what was the bio?
Oh, go ahead, George.
Bilateral symmetry?
No, the shadow biome.
Shadow biome, the ultra terrestrial, or even the interdimensional hypotheses.
Not interdimensional is the first time that's been brought up, but the shadow biome and the ultra. I hadn't heard either of those before, so please Share those with me.
So with respect to the shadow biome, for instance, since you're a preponderant believer of rational thinking and science, there is a professor who works out of Stanford. His name is Dr. Gary
He
Nolan.
says that while I'm drinking 12% ABV.
There you
Go
go.
ahead.
Living the dream. So Dr. Gary Nolan, he's been nominated for 7 or 8 Nobel Prizes, and he's one of the foremost thinkers with respect to the field of ufology.
Data scientist.
The government has also contracted with him as a consultant in regards to the study of metamaterials. Metamaterials are breakaway pieces of supposed extraterrestrial craft, but he's been in the circuit recently saying, hey, there might be a shadow biome or a hidden underlying dimension of reality that runs in accordance with ours that we just can't see. And science also posits that with our 5 senses, we don't necessarily see about 95% of the different types of energies or frequencies without the assistance of technological means or methods. For instance, we can't see an infrared. We can't necessarily detect Wi-Fi with our eyes or ears or whatever have you, but we know that these invisible kinds of energies are there. So that in essence, I hope I was able to articulate that properly with respect to the shadow biome, and that there might be some form of non-human intelligence that exists in this dimension that we can't necessarily perceive with our 5 senses.
I also have an answer real quick. That was awesome. Thank you, George.
Mhm.
Shadow biome, also known as the shadow biosphere, is a hypothetical microbial biosphere of Earth that would use radically different biochemical and molecular process from that of currently known life. It is suggested that early Earth may have hosted multiple origins of life, some of which produce chemical variations of life as we know it. These alternative forms of life could have become extinct or might still exist today. The existence of the shadow biosphere would mean that life has evolved on Earth more than once and would suggest that microorganisms may exist on Earth which have no evolutionary connection with any other known form of life. However, it is important to note that the majority of biologists do not endorse this idea of a shadow biosphere and that there is not much evidence to suggest that it exists. But it's something people talk about.
Okay, so there was a show a while back called Coast to Coast.
Oh, Art
With Art
Bell, come
Bell.
on, man.
By Art Bell. Yes, and I think your argument would have played very well.
Well, it's not necessarily an argument. It's just one of you said we entertain multiple hypotheses. It's just one of the many that there are out there.
And it may be that you both adequately explained that, but as my excuse at the moment is going to be 12% ABV.
What is ABV?
Alcohol by volume.
Oh, okay. Well, and that's your excuse for what?
For not understanding your argument.
Oh, I don't think it's an argument.
What happened to George?
I don't know. I don't think it's an argument. I think it's just like you said, we're holding multiple hypotheses at the same time, right? So
George, quit blinking in and out of reality.
Yeah, he went back to the shadow biosphere. Anyway,
and why is he at a Star Trek console?
Because Star Trek
Say again?
rules, man.
Why are you
Sorry, I
at
had
a
to
Star
restart.
Trek console?
Oh, this is the classic NCC 1701.
No
It was
bloody A, no bloody B, no
the
bloody
OG.
D.
Boldly going where no man has ever gone before in relation to
Right.
esoteric and metaphysical ideas.
One of the reasons that I prefer Star Wars over Star Trek is because their shit was held together with duct tape.
Well, one is a dystopia and one is a utopia. And with design aesthetics, things that are symmetrical speak to utopian and things that are asymmetrical speak to dystopian. And of course, everything in Star Wars is super asymmetrical. Whereas in Star Trek, you've got your utopian symmetrical design aesthetics. This is the art director and me talking about.
And that's why the Millennium Falcon was built so fucked up.
Right. Like a cheeseburger.
You want to... Can we make anything more asymmetrical than the Millennium Falcon?
I don't know.
It certainly grabs attention, but did The Last Jedi kill it for you, Aaron?
I have to admit, it's a funny thing. I'm going to admit to my nerdiness now. When you remember, I'm a little older than you guys. So Star Wars was different than every other sci-fi that had ever come out, in that until 1977, every single science fiction movie was a dystopian nightmare. Every
Right.
one of them. Even the Star Trek shows, the original series, even those, they had the Batman cameraman
Right.
where everything's all,
Yes.
The Dutch angle. Yeah.
where everything would be in shadow except the eyes somehow,
right.
and it would be
Gotcha.
like a choir for whatever reason in the background, and everything is haunting and spooky, and
Yeah.
just everything is always bad like that. And but all the technology is perfect, right? Everything's shiny and brand new. But then you get into Star Wars, and shit is rusty and held together with duct tape. But at the same but at the same time, all the people are cool as fuck. And there's a totally different vibe. You wanted to be in Star Wars. Shit's happening. This is cool. I like this. Even though most of the shit was broken down because people could relate to that.
Right.
Especially people in my neck in the trailer parks I grew up in, we're used to having to bang on shit to make it work.
Right. Right.
All right. I don't know
Two
where I was
vastly
going with
different
that.
versions of the future.
Yeah. So I have other projects
Yep.
that I need to dive into, and
Okay.
I appreciate that we did this thing, and it was a weird thing for me to do, especially on my channel the way this is doing. But I have to bail.
Thank you for
Of
your time. And
course.
before you go, can you tell us about your T-shirt?
Yeah, we did ask this question like 2 hours ago, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't think he answered it though, but it's
So-
still an interesting T-shirt.
Somebody gave me this shirt,
Mhm.
and this has been the only show that I've ever done since I've had it that it would be appropriate
Yeah.
to wear it.
What an
Nice.
honor!
Yeah. What an honor.
This is the first time you've ever done content on this.
Yeah, it's
And
a
we're
huge honor
stoked.
for us. Yeah, it's a really big honor for us. Honestly, I appreciate your takes on stuff. I still feel like the answer of like, well, what Carson and I witnessed is basically we filtered it through our modern sensibilities, and the answer is, I don't know, coincidence. It kind of lands a little flat for me, but all right, I'll take it. It is what it is.
Yep. There is a phrase not unlike Hakuna Matata that you might want to learn for this. Is "the fuck if I know."
Well, I didn't think you would know. I just thought you might have, a couple guesses. I guess we got those. So that's good
All
enough for me, man. Honestly, it's a huge honor to have you on, man. Seriously. Like, and I'm so
Don't
glad
blow
we weren't.
smoke up my ass.
I'm just glad we weren't ripped to shreds. I was scared I was going to end up like one of those Islamic scholars with just like my guts
Or
hanging out at the
Jehovah's
end.
Witness, yeah.
Man, but I don't feel that way. So that's good.
But for everybody out there in the UAP field, please feel free to peruse Aaron Ra's content, support him on
Aaron.
Patreon, subscribe to his YouTube. He's one of the most prevalent free thinkers that we have in modern times, and I suggest you give a look into his rational, skeptical kind of approach, and
Hear, hear.
it might challenge your preconceived notions on a lot of different things.
And that's good.
My
Thank you,
humility
Aaron.
requires that I mention that if you blow this much smoke up my ass, I might produce flowered farts.
Oh,
But
well, that's just a mass
Thank-
hallucination, man.
Thank you very much. Make sure that you share with me your links to your own channel so that I can put that in the description
Thank
of
you.
mine. This
And
was a
vice
different
versa.
format because I know this is going up in your channel, but you had me recorded on mine for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
It's all good.
I'm down with it. Yeah, I need
Us
all
too.
the help I can get. So if
Us
you
too.
are inclined, if you're familiar with what I do and you like what I do, please do consider being a sponsor at patreon.com/ARONRA. I need all the help I can get. Literally, thank you so much.
You have our
bet.
support.
Thank you so much.
May the force be with you.
Nanu,
It's not-
nanu.
It's an honor.
Touche. Thank you, Mr. Ra.
Thank you.